Modernity in Europe and North America reflected the emergence of a new kind of society in the wake of the French, American, and industrial revolutions. Driven by technological progress and characterized by rapid change, the 19th century gave birth to our industrialized middle-class culture of mass production and mass advertising and mass consumption, including the mass consumption of leisure activities such as shopping and going to entertainments and visiting art museums. So art museums themselves were a development of the 19th century, and they made art available to the public in a way we now take for granted. The first national museum was the Louvre Museum. This is it in Paris. Art was now for everybody, no longer by the church or by the nobility. So many of scholars agree that modern art started from the Louvre Museum in 1793, and it ended after the World War II, like this. So this time period from the Louvre Museum's foundation to the end of the World War II is called modern art. That after the World War II, we can say the art movement, all the art movements in the postmodernism or contemporary art. And we learned the photography, before, you remember it, right? So, and the first photograph in the world, daguerreotype, came out of the world during this modern time. And as a photograph had developed, many artists abandoned the traditional art style, and they tried new art styles because the traditional art was not meaningful anymore, thanks to the invention of a camera. So that also happened during this time period. But the beginning of the modern art movements were still realistic, and their arts were based on the observation. Because photographs development was just a baby step, for the beginning of the early of the modern art period, it wasn't that threatening for the painters. However, after the daguerreotype, the photograph's development was accelerated, and by the 1888, Kodak invented the portable camera, and everyone could record their mundane life. So the modern art divided like about here, like this too. Before the avant-garde, after the avant-garde. Like this, modern 1 and modern 2. So, so artists needed something new rather than the realistic art, because of the photographers, the invention. So the avant-garde means newest art. So after the avant-garde, the art history began to write totally different story. So here is the avant-garde. Before the avant-garde, there were three major art movements. The first one is realism, and the next one is impressionism, and the last one is post-impressionism. So these three are still realistic based on the observation. And after the newest art movement, the avant-garde, there are diverse art movement arose. So, for example, the Fauvism, Expressionism, Cubism, Futurism, Dada, Surrealism, Idealism. So today we're gonna see these three art movement: realism, impressionism, post-impressionism before the avant-garde, and then in the next meeting we are going to see the rest art movement after the avant-garde. So let's see the realism first before the avant-garde. A number of artists broke away from the traditions of earlier 18th and the 19th century art to create objective representations of the real world. The movement called realism refers specifically to writers and artists in France who were concerned about achieving social change after the revolution of 1848. Realist artists sought to depict the everyday and the ordinary rather than the historic, the heroic, or the exotic. Their works unmasked for art viewers the true lives of the middle and the lower classes. That is the most important concept of the realism. So we saw this work before, right? This is the realism artist Honor Dormier's lithography printing work of art. So he recorded a historically terrible event in this work. So since we know this story, so we're gonna just skip this work story. And let's see this painting. Do you remember the Baroque and the Rococo painting we learned last week?
Yes.
Yes, it was based on the, the biblical episode or the novels, daily life. And reminding that works and what's the difference that, the old artworks and this realism paintings. Can you see the difference from this, the modern art? What's the subject of this painting? What can you see? Huh?
Like mining. It reminds me of like mining.
Yes. Seems like they're the work class people, right? Yes, they're working hard. But until the last week, we just saw very grandeur and heroic and the biblical episode and the kings and the religion things, some kind of that, the luxurious things, right? But look at this painting. It's just show the normal people's life. So this painting, the Stone Brokers, was shocking for its depiction of working class people on a large size canvas and a scale normally reversed for the heroic subject matter of history paintings. And Corvette, the artist, the Corvette's painting, this highlights the backbreaking and monotonous work of the poor. The breaking of stones was a job taught by older generations to the young generation men. And it was a job a man would have for a lifetime to make money, to make live. So the painting shows an older workers and his young assistant as powerful and unrelenting qualities that alarmed the upper classes. And a year before, Courbet painted this work in the revolution working conditions and to low pay. And the next art movement is Impressionism. So the main theme is same as the realism, but the technically is slightly different. So the artists who came to be called Impressionists worked in individual and sometimes very different styles, but they were united in rejected the formal approach of the art taught in the academy in Paris. So the academies, the art academies in Paris, they're just they made the art for the religion and the the novelty. So this impressionist artist attempted not so much to portray exactly and realistically such scenes as a landscape or life in the city, as to capture the light and the sensations produced by the scene. And the Impressionists formed a group to show their work together outside the official salon in 8 exhibitions held between 1874 and 1886. Their subject matter was scenes of daily life, for example, rural landscapes and life in the modern and growing cities in France. Impresses were often intent on capturing the essence of a moment in time. So we're gonna see the 3 Impressionist artists, and this is the first Impressionist artist, Edouard Manet. He was a French modernist painter, and he was one of the first 9th century artists to paint modern life and a pivotal figure in the transition from realism to the Impressionism. So let's talk about this painting. Can you read this painting? Can you find the meaning of this painting?
Well, I see bucket of fruits. I'm gonna guess, are they on some kind of a picnic? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I guess they're enjoying the weather outside. Yeah, they're on the picnic. Yes, it seems like a little bit odd, right?
Yeah, it's like there's a lot of emotions going on in here.
It seems like odd, and it actually is kind of hard to read, right? So,
Yes.
Yeah.
That is the feature of Manet's painting. Manet's paintings are hard to read. For this painting, let's see in detail. Why this front woman is naked and posed like that? And where is she looking at? Can you see her eyes? She's looking at us. Why these 2 men are dressed up and act like there are only 2 of them? And what is the woman, on the back? Huh?
Yeah, it looks like the 2 men are like in the same place, and the other lady that's naked, she's in a different place.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
the one in the background too.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Pretty much all the situation here, right? And look at this backside woman. Is she taking a bath there? So seems like there is no relationship between these figures. So Manet's painting is odd, and art historians still debate just what he meant by it. In the modeling his figures, so he focused on the highest and the lowest values, all but the eliminating the middle and the transitional tones. So as a result, forms such as the nude woman's body appear flatted. So as though eliminated by a sudden flashlight. So I will share a video to see this painting in detail.
We're in the Musée d'Orsay, looking at Déjeuner sur l'herbe, lunching on the grass.
By Manet, although it didn't originally have that title. Its first title was The Bath.
And there is really neither bathing nor a luncheon going on. There is a woman in the distance in the water. There is some fruit and a brioche or roll in the foreground, so perhaps a remnant of a lunch, but that's not what this painting is about.
But it's very difficult to determine precisely what this painting is about, and I think that's part of the point. The painting was exhibited not at the official salon sanctioned by the Royal Academy of Fine Arts, the authority for art. Instead, this was exhibited at the Salon des Refusés.
The Salon des Refusés was set up by Emperor Napoleon III because so many works of art had been excluded from the official salon. But even though this painting was in the exhibition of rejected artwork, it still caused a storm of controversy based both on what was being portrayed, but also its painting technique, how it was portrayed.
These figures are clearly modern Parisian figures.
And that's the problem.
They're not set far away in ancient Greek and Roman mythology or set back in time. These are figures clearly wearing fashionable Parisian clothing, except, of course, the nude woman, which is the other part of the problem.
By placing a woman who is nude in this context, and because she's not veiled or distanced by mythology, she's not a nymph in a classical grove, she is actually a recognizable figure. This is Manet's model, Victorine Moron. And because the two men are also recognizable figures, there is an immediacy here that creates a degree of discomfort for the viewer.
These figures don't look idealized. They don't look timeless. They look like actual people you would see on the streets of Paris. The other significant problem with these three figures is that no one seems to be truly interacting. The nude female figure looks directly out at us in a gaze that is very nonchalant and yet very direct.
Which is also breaking with tradition. In the rare instances where a nude female figure would look out toward the audience, it might be with a coy look. But here there is a figure that's returning the viewer's gaze.
And then we have the two male figures. The figure on the right gestures toward the figure in the center, but the figure in the center seems to gaze absently out of the painting and doesn't seem to return the figure on the right's gesture and conversation. And then we have this odd figure in the background who's spatially too large for where she should be in the middle ground.
There are all kinds of spatial problems here that Manet has built in. These are not happenstance, these are purposeful. For example, the woman in the background seems to reach down to scoop something out of the water, but in fact, she seems to be reaching down to the thumb of the man in the foreground, collapsing the last traces of the illusion of depth.
We also have figures who are rendered very flatly. So for example, the nude female figure is not modeled with that lovely movement from light to dark that would give her a sense of three-dimensionality that is typical of representations of the female nude historically. Critics noted that she seemed to have a kind of studio lighting about her instead of the natural outdoor light of where she's located.
There is some minor modeling around the breast, under the thigh, but for the most part, she looks like she's a flat cutout.
And even those shadows are very dark. There's almost a sense of her being outlined in dark gray grays and blacks instead of a lovely soft modeling. Overall, the handling of paint, whether we're looking at the grass in the foreground or the meadow in the distance, it's incredibly loosely brushed. There's no sense of finish. And for paintings that were approved by the jury for the Royal Academy, having a painting that was really worked on, where there was no sense left of the hand of the artist, that was the priority. And Manet is just flagrantly disregarding that. We also have a figure who seems naked and not nude. And that's because we have her discarded clothing, including her hat in the foreground, and the fact that she's wearing a kind of ribbon. So we feel as though she's a modern Parisian woman who has discarded her clothing and not Venus, born nude naturally from the sea.
She's not an allegorical figure. She's not a mythological figure. She's somebody who has taken off her dress.
Manet is very consciously drawing on the tradition of art history here.
He understood traditional art. He had copied paintings at the Louvre.
And so this painting is based directly on at least two sources, a painting that was thought to be by Giorgione, now understood to be by Titian in the Louvre, which similarly shows two clothed male figures and two nude female figures in a beautiful landscape.
But Déjeuner sur l'Herbe is also inspired by a work by Raphael that Manet had seen through an engraved copy showing the Judgment of Paris. And in the lower right corner of that engraving were two river gods and a nymph. And it was that composition that Manet has borrowed.
So we can easily understand the reactions of the French public in 1863 when they went to the Salon des Refuses. In fact, Manet was cultivating their confusion. This refusal to tell a story is a refusal to do precisely what the Academy and especially the art-going public wanted from a painting.
Manet is teasing his viewers. He's giving all of the indications that there's a narrative and yet not including that narrative. And so the subject is then no longer what is being enacted, but rather the act of creating a work of art itself, the choices that he's making as an artist to his brushwork, to his composition.
He is making a challenge to the authorities that controlled art in France and making a strong declaration. I am the one who makes these decisions for my art.
And that forceful declaration will have a tremendous impact on the development of modernism in the late 19th century and into the 20th century.
How was that? That was Manet's painting about this. So we saw this painting before, so we're gonna just skip this painting. So Manet depicted the middle or lower class people in his painting for the resistance to the traditional, the art and the academy in France. Let's move on to the next Impressionist artist, Claude Monet. Claude Monet stands like no other painter for the Impressionist style and as the French master of light. And he was also a central pioneer of 20th century painting. When Monet traveled to Paris to visit the Louvre Museum, he witnessed painters copying from the old masters, just in the traditional paintings. However, Monet brought his paints and other tools with him and sit by a window in the Louvre Museum and paint what he saw. Monet was in Paris for several years and met several painters who would become friends and fellow Impressionists. One of those friends was Edward Manet. This is the Impressionism sunrise, Impression sunrise painting. So by Claude Monet, first shown at what would become known as the Exhibition of the Impressionists in Paris in April 1874. So the painting is credited with inspiring the name of the Impressionist movement. Impressionism, Impression Sunrise, this painting depicts a port in Monet's hometown. And Monet painted the same subjects in many times because the lights and the sceneries are different by the time, by the day, and by the weather. And he liked to paint the nature views outside to capture all the difference of lighting while he was painting. And this is another beautiful landscape painting. And he used brush stroke speed to show the time in his work of art. Through this painting, we even could feel the windy weather because of the strong brush stroke. Monet was diagnosed with nuclear cataracts in both eyes in 1912 at the age of 72. His visual problems began much earlier. So soon after the age of 65, he began to experience changes in his perception of color. In his eye, everything looked blurry and yellowish and brownish to him. After he was diagnosed with cataracts, he spent most of his time at his garden. This is his garden view. And he left so many beautiful garden landscape painting. And he died at 86. So I'm gonna share a video to show you his beautiful garden with his beautiful paintings he left. This beautiful garden. All right, and let's move on to the last artist of Impressionism, Auguste Renoir. Renoir was a French artist who was a leading painter in the development of the Impressionist style, and he depicted beauty and especially feminine sensuality. This painting is one of the Impressionism's most celebrated masterpieces. The painting depicts a typical Sunday afternoon at the original Moulin de l'Agret in the district of Montmartre in Paris. In the late 19th century, working class Parisians would dress up and spend time there, dancing, drinking, and eating. Also, he left so many beautiful portrait paintings like this. So look at the brush strokes on her hair. It looks so very soft, but every single strokes are alive in this work of art. And this is another Renoir's portrait style. This is unusual portrait style actually. The composition is not focusing on the figures nor the landscape, and even the kid doesn't show the full torso in this painting because he tried to make a unique portrait style in this painting with the different angles. Renoir shows the completed technique as Impressionist through this painting. And there is a video about his life with his lots of masterpieces in the Moodle room. So please watch the video to fully understand the artist. Now, We're gonna move on to the last art movement before the avant-garde, post-impressionism. The next generation of the artists admired many aspects of Impressionism, especially its brightened palette and direct painting technique. But they reacted in various ways to what they received as its shortcomings. Their styles are so highly personal that we commonly group them together under the neutral term post-impressionist, meaning simply the artist who came after Impressionism. So we are going to see 3 post-impressionism artists. The first artist will be Georges Seurat. We saw this artist before. And the next artist is Vincent van Gogh. He is the post-impressionist artist. And the last one is Paul Gauguin. So let's see Georges Seurat first. Georges Seurat wanted to place Impressionism's intuitive recording of optical sensations on a more scientific footing. His reading of color theories led him to develop the technique of pointillism, in which discrete dots and dashes of pure complementary colors were supposed to blend in the viewer's eyes. So we learned, this artistic technique in a visual elements chapter, for the optical color mixture. So he painted all the colors with the color dots, but he didn't use direct colors. He used, optical color mixture. So for example, to make a green color, he used yellow dots and the blue dots. And when the lots of color dots put together, they create new color from the viewer's eyes. And the next post-impressionist artist is Vincent van Gogh. Vincent van Gogh was a Dutch post-impressionist painter who is among the most famous and influential figures in the history of the Western art. In just over a decade, he created about 2,100 artworks, which is a lot, including around 860 oil paintings, and most of which date from the last 2 years of his life. His artworks includes like landscapes, still lifes, portraits, and self-portraits, and are characterized by bold colors and dramatic, impulsive, and expressive brushwork, and that contributed to the foundations of modern art. Sadly, he was not commercially successful, and he suicided at 37, came after years of mental illness and poverty. So this is a Starry Night, which is the one of the most recognized paintings in the history of Western culture. It describes the view from the east-facing window of asylum room just before sunrise, with the addition of an ideal village. And this is his self-portrait when he had ears. And this is his bedroom painting. There is a video link in the Moodle room about this painting. So please watch it after this meeting. And this is another his self-portrait painting after he lost his ear. He began to hallucinate and suffered attacks in which he lost consciousness. During one of these attacks, he used the knife to cut his ear. He could later recall nothing about that event. And let's see the last post-impressionist artist, Paul Gauguin. Paul Gauguin worked in an impressionist style early in his career. Gauguin was interested in expressing spiritual meaning in his art. All these he sought on the sun-drenched island of the South Pacific, and where he journeyed to escape what he called the disease of civilization. So this is one of his famous painting, Titan. The brilliant high-key colors of his Titan paintings reveal his depth to Impressionism. To this lightened palette, he added his own innovations, flattened forms and broad color areas, a strong outline, tertiary color harmonies, a taste for the exotic, an aura of mystery, and quest for the primitive. The woman's pose is derived from the Egyptian art, like the legs shown in profile and the shoulders depicted frontally. So Gauguin believed that European art had been in thrall for too long to the legacy of Greece and Rome, and he looked to the art of Egypt, Islam, and Asia to renew it. So there is a video about his artistic journey based on his journal he left in the Moodle room. So I need you to watch the video to understand this artist's creative viewpoint. So we are going to continue to see the modern art after the avant-garde in the next meeting. And we have a discussion today. So this is today's discussion. Everyone, please go to discussion 12.1 in week 12. And please read e-textbook page 519 and discuss why artists choose same themes and depict the themes differently. So that's the topic of today's discussion.